The academy hall fell silent as the instructor spoke of the galaxy's most feared predators. Beasts so deadly, entire worlds trembled at their name. Every cadet listened in terror, except one, a human. She raised her hand, and with a calm smile, said the words that would shake the entire class to its core. We used to keep them as pets. The lecture hall revelation. The massive lecture hall aboard Station Concordia buzzed with nervous energy as cadets from across the galaxy settled into their seats. The Interstellar Military Academy's xenobiology course was known for its dramatic presentations, but today felt different. Professor Zethkar, a towering saurian with emerald scales and piercing amber eyes, stood at the center of the amphitheater adjusting his holographic display controls. The lights dimmed, casting long shadows across the curved walls designed to accommodate beings from 47 different worlds. Zethkar's reptilian features gleamed under the artificial lighting as he surveyed his diverse class of future military officers. Today, we discuss the Void Stalkers, he announced, his deep voice carrying the weight of personal experience. A visible scar ran from his left eye to his jaw, a testament to encounters most beings only survived in nightmares. The holographic display above his head flickered to life, revealing a creature that made several cadets instinctively grip their armrests. The image showed a beast that defied easy description. Standing nearly 10 feet tall at the shoulder, the Void Stalker possessed a sleek, predatory build covered in midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light. 6 powerful legs ended in retractable claws capable of slicing through reinforced steel. Its elongated head housed rows of crystalline teeth, while 4 glowing blue eyes tracked movement with supernatural awareness. Most unsettling were the tentacle-like appendages that extended from its shoulders, each tipped with sensory organs that could detect heartbeats from miles away. These creatures, Professor Zethkar continued, circling the hologram slowly, represent the pinnacle of evolutionary hunting perfection. Native to the void regions between star systems, they have been responsible for the complete evacuation of 12 colony worlds in the past century alone. A crystalline Veltar cadet in the front row shimmered with anxiety, her translucent form taking on a pale blue hue. Behind her, a massive Rakthani warrior shifted uncomfortably, his stone-like skin grinding audibly against his seat. Void Stalkers hunt in coordinated packs of 5 to 7 individuals, the professor explained, manipulating the display to show tactical formations. They possess intelligence levels comparable to most sentient species, with communication abilities that span both audible frequencies and quantum entanglement patterns. When they mark a target, whether individual or settlement, they will pursue it across star systems if necessary. The hologram shifted to show grainy security footage from the Kepler 442 incident. Dark shapes moved through abandoned corridors, with fluid grace, their blue eyes glowing in the darkness. The timestamp showed the footage was only 3 months old. Their hunting methodology is what makes them truly terrifying, Zethkar continued, his cybernetic left arm whirring softly as he gestured. The replacement limb, crafted from the finest Nexus Corporation technology, was a constant reminder of his own encounter with these creatures. They don't simply attack. They study their prey for weeks, learning routines, identifying weaknesses, and most disturbingly, they appear to derive pleasure from the psychological torment of their victims. A collective shudder ran through the amphitheater. Several cadets from more peaceful species looked genuinely ill, their natural flight responses triggered by the clinical description of predatory behavior. The evacuation protocols for Void Stalker encounters are absolute, the professor stated firmly. Minimum safe distance is 100 kilometers. Engagement is only authorized with full military support, including orbital bombardment capabilities. These creatures cannot be reasoned with, cannot be captured alive, and absolutely cannot be contained through conventional means. He paused, for dramatic effect, letting the weight of those words settle over the room like a funeral shroud. The very concept of peaceful coexistence with Void Stalkers is not merely impossible, it is a dangerous fantasy that has cost thousands of lives. They are pure predators, evolved killing machines with no capacity for anything beyond hunt, kill, and reproduce. In the third row, Largely unnoticed by her fellow cadets who were absorbed in their collective terror, sat human cadet Elena Vasquez. She possessed the unremarkable appearance that humans were known for throughout the galaxy. Average height, brown hair tied in a regulation bun, dark eyes that seemed attentive but held a hint of something that might have been amusement. Her uniform bore the standard insignia of a third-year xenobiology student, with additional patches indicating advanced courses in interspecies psychology and behavioral analysis. While her classmates absorbed Professor Zethkar's presentation, with appropriate horror, Elena found herself fighting the urge to check her chronometer. She had heard similar lectures before from different professors about different species, but the underlying message remained consistent. The galaxy was filled with monsters, and humans were foolishly optimistic about making friends with them. Kati. Sensory capabilities of void stalkers extend beyond our current understanding, the professor was saying, now fully immersed in his subject. Those shoulder appendages can detect biochemical changes associated with fear, excitement, or aggression from distances exceeding 50 kilometers. Their pack coordination allows them to surround prey across vast areas, cutting off all possible escape routes before moving in for coordinated strikes. The holographic display cycled through a series of tactical analyses, showing attack patterns that resembled military precision more than animal behavior. Red dots representing void stalkers moved in complex formations around blue dots representing settlements, systematically isolating and eliminating targets. In the Arcturus 7 incident, Zethkar continued, survivors reported that the creatures seemed to be playing with them, allowing certain individuals to escape temporarily before recapturing them. This behavior suggests not only advanced intelligence but a capacity for cruelty that rivals the most sociopathic sentient species. A tentacled Keth Mori cadet made a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve, which Elena's universal translator rendered as untranslatable expression of existential dread. The pack bonds of void stalkers are absolute, the professor explained. Harm one member and the entire pack will pursue vengeance across the galaxy if necessary. There are documented cases of void stalker revenge attacks occurring decades after the original incident, suggesting not only long-term memory but cultural transmission of grudges across generations. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the ambient hum of the station's life support systems. Several cadets had stopped breathing entirely, caught in the grip of species-wide nightmares. Now then, Professor Zethkar said, his voice returning to normal speaking volume. Who can recite the primary survival protocol when encountering void stalker sign in the wild? Multiple hands shot up immediately, eager to demonstrate knowledge that might someday save their lives. Immediate retreat to minimum safe distance and activation of emergency beacon, recited a Helixani cadet, whose spiral shell had retracted almost completely into its protective coils. Correct? And if retreat is impossible? Establish defensive perimeter using maximum available firepower while awaiting military intervention, added a thermalite whose internal temperature had risen noticeably, causing heat shimmer around his crystalline form. Also correct. The key principle to remember, Zethkar emphasized, is that there is no such thing as a controlled encounter with void stalkers. These beings exist in a permanent state of warfare against anything that is not them. They cannot be negotiated with, bargained with, or in any way domesticated. The professor's scarred features twisted into something that might have been humor, if it weren't so grim. The very idea of a tame void stalker is as absurd as a friendly black hole or a helpful plague. These creatures are evolutionary perfection focused solely on predation. They understand only dominance, territory, and the hunt. In the third row, Elena finally gave up fighting her amusement and allowed herself a small smile. The expression was subtle enough that none of her fellow cadets noticed, but it would have been immediately recognizable to anyone from her family as the look that preceded particularly interesting revelations. Can anyone imagine, Professor Zethkar asked rhetorically, a scenario where sentient beings could coexist peacefully with such perfect predators? Where these ultimate killing machines might be anything other than the galaxy's most efficient destroyers of life? The silence stretched on, heavy with imagined horrors and the collective weight of 47 different species' survival instincts. Then, from the third row, a hand rose. Not dramatically, not with any particular urgency, but with the casual gesture of someone flagging down a server in a restaurant. Professor Zethkar blinked, his presentation rhythm completely derailed by the unexpected interruption. He peered through the amphitheater's lighting, trying to identify which cadet had the audacity to interrupt his carefully crafted dramatic moment. "Yes?" he said, his tone suggesting this had better be remarkably important. Elena cleared her throat, a sound that somehow carried perfectly through the acoustically designed space, despite its softness. "My grandmother runs a sanctuary for them," she said simply. "We've had 3 living with our family for about 8 years now." The silence that followed wasn't the dramatic, breath-holding silence from before. This was the silence of 180 minds, simultaneously trying to process information that violated fundamental laws of reality, like being told that mathematics had been proven wrong, or that space had decided to run backwards. Professor Zethkar stared at her for a long moment, his amber eyes cycling through confusion, disbelief, and what appeared to be the early stages of either enlightenment or a complete psychological breakdown. "I beg your pardon?" he managed to say. Elena shifted slightly in her seat, seemingly unbothered by being the sudden focus of 180 pairs of eyes, optical sensors, and whatever the gaseous ethereals used for visual perception. "Void stalkers," she clarified helpfully, as if the professor might have forgotten the subject of his own lecture. "My grandmother Rosa runs the Vasquez family sanctuary on Luna Colony. We've been caring for Storm, Echo, and Titan for about 8 years now. Well, Storm's been with us the longest. We found him as a juvenile after his pack was killed by poachers." The amphitheater erupted into chaos. It wasn't the controlled disorder of academic debate or the organized confusion of emergency drills. This was the sound of fundamental reality breaking down in front of witnesses. Voices rose in dozens of different languages and communication methods. Several cadets stood up so quickly they knocked over their personal data pads. At least 5 different species produced sounds that their universal translators simply gave up on and rendered as untranslatable expression of existential crisis. Silence. Professor Zethkar's voice cut through the noise like a plasma blade through tissue paper. His cybernetic arm was making mechanical sounds that suggested either intense processing or imminent system failure. The amphitheater fell quiet so quickly that the sudden absence of sound was almost physical. "Cadet Vasquez," the professor continued, his voice artificially controlled in a way that suggested he was either about to explode or assign everyone additional coursework. "Are you claiming that your family has successfully domesticated void stalkers?" "Oh no," Elena said, looking genuinely offended by the suggestion. "That would be completely unethical. We haven't domesticated them at all. They're still fully wild void stalkers. We just provided them with a safe space to heal and recover after they were traumatized." The word traumatized in reference to Galaxy-class apex predators caused several cadets to make sounds of distress. "Traumatized?" Professor Zethkar repeated, his voice climbing in pitch. "Storm had severe anxiety issues when we first found him," Elena explained matter-of-factly. "He'd been separated from his pack for months and had developed some pretty serious behavioral problems. Wouldn't hunt properly, kept trying to hide in small spaces, had terrible nightmares. It took grandmother almost 2 years to help him work through his grief. A thermalite cadet in the 5th row achieved a temperature spike that activated the lecture hall's fire suppression systems, filling part of the amphitheater with sound-dampening foam. Grief, the professor said numbly. Void stalkers don't experience grief, they're predators. They don't form emotional attachments. Elena pulled out her personal communicator, a standard issue device that most cadets used for taking notes and accessing course materials. "Would you like to see them?" she asked brightly, activating the holographic display function. "I've got tons of recordings. This one's from last week. It's Storm teaching Titan how to properly maintain their claws." The 3-dimensional image that materialized above Elena's desk was going to be discussed in xenobiological circles for decades. It showed what was unmistakably a fully grown void stalker, all 10 feet of evolutionary perfection, carefully demonstrating claw maintenance techniques to a smaller, obviously younger member of his species. The scene took place in what appeared to be a natural cave system, filled with comfortable sleeping areas and various enrichment activities. But what truly shattered the sanity of everyone watching was the expression on Storm's face. Where Professor Zethkar had described cold intelligence and predatory calculation, the hologram showed something that could only be characterized as patient mentorship. The older Voidstalker's 4 blue eyes held a gentle focus as he guided the younger creature through the delicate process of claw care. "Storm's really good with the youngsters," Elena said fondly, apparently oblivious to the psychological devastation she was causing. "Grandmother says he has natural teaching instincts. Titan was only about 3 years old when we found him, and Storm basically adopted him as his own cub." The sound that emerged from the classroom was like the collective deflation of every worldview simultaneously. The sanctuary tour. "This is impossible," declared Kethvar, a massive Rakthani warrior whose stone-like hide had turned an alarming shade of gray. His species had fought Voidstalkers in the Outer Rim Wars for 3 generations. These creatures are incapable of nurturing behavior. They exist solely to hunt and kill. Elena looked at him with the patient expression typically reserved for very confused children. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "I suppose that depends on whether they feel safe and understood. Would you like to meet them directly? Grandmother's probably in the main habitat right now." Before Professor Zethkar could object, or possibly before his brain could process the implications, Elena had activated a real-time communication link. The holographic display expanded to show a sprawling underground facility with natural stone walls and carefully controlled lighting that mimicked the void regions between stars. The figure that appeared in the transmission was a human woman in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades spent working with dangerous creatures. She wore simple work clothes and was carrying what appeared to be a medical scanner. "Elena, mi amor," Rosa Vasquez called out in accented Standard Galactic, her face lighting up with the universal expression of grandmothers everywhere. "How are your studies going? Are you eating enough? You look thin in that uniform." "Hi, abuela," Elena replied with the long-suffering tone of grandchildren everywhere. "I'm fine. Listen, I'm in my xenobiology class, and we're discussing Voidstalkers. Professor Zethkar and my classmates don't quite believe that Storm, Echo, and Titan are as gentle as I've described them." Rosa's expression shifted to the kind of proud smile usually reserved for honor roll announcements or successful potty training. "Oh, the boys would love to meet Elena's friends," she said warmly. "Storm, Echo, Titan, come say hello." What happened? Next was going to be referenced in academic papers for the next century. A sound echoed through the transmission that every cadet recognized from their worst nightmares, the deep harmonic call of a Voidstalker pack. Except instead of the bone-chilling hunting cry that had sent military units into retreat, this sounded more like enthusiasm, like very large creatures expressing joy at hearing familiar voices. The first Voidstalker to appear in the camera's range would have been terrifying under normal circumstances. Storm was everything the textbooks described, nearly 10 feet of midnight black predator with 6 powerful legs and 4 glowing blue eyes. What made the scene surreal was his behavior. Instead of stalking or positioning for attack, he approached Rosa with the careful, deliberate movement of someone who was very aware of his size relative to his surroundings. "There's my good boy," Rosa cooed, reaching up to scratch behind what approximated his ears. Storm lowered his massive head and made a sound that could only be described as purring, if purring could register on seismic equipment. "Storm's our eldest," Rosa explained to the stunned audience. "He's been with us for 8 years now. Came to us after poachers killed his original pack for their bioluminescent organs. Poor baby had severe PTSD and trust issues. Took months before he'd even let me in the same room." The crystalline Veltar cadet had achieved complete transparency and showed no signs of returning to solid form anytime soon. Before anyone could process this information, the habitat filled with what appeared to be controlled chaos. Echo, the second Voidstalker, bounded into view with all the grace of an avalanche. She was slightly smaller than Storm but moved with puppy-like enthusiasm, that completely contradicted everything they'd been taught about apex predator behavior. Echo. Careful with the equipment. Rosa laughed as the creature skidded to a stop just inches from a delicate-looking monitoring station. Echo made a sound that might have been apologetic, and then did something that broke the collective sanity of everyone watching. She sat. Not the crouch of a predator preparing to strike, not the alert positioning of a creature maintaining territorial awareness. She sat like an enormous, impossibly dangerous dog waiting for treats. "Show them your trick, Echo," Rosa encouraged. Echo tilted her massive head, considering the request. Then, with the kind of resigned dignity usually associated with circus performers, she rolled over onto her back, exposing her vulnerable underside in a display of absolute trust. The amphitheater was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop in the next star system. She learned that from watching nature documentaries about Earth canines, Rosa explained proudly. Very quick learner, our Echo. Though the first few times she tried it indoors, she knocked over half the medical bay. The final member of the sanctuary family chose that moment to make his entrance, and Titan clearly didn't believe in subtle arrivals. The youngest Void Stalker came charging into view with all the coordination of a newborn giraffe and twice the enthusiasm. He was noticeably smaller than the other two, with the gangly proportions of an adolescent who hadn't grown into his paws yet. He also appeared to be carrying something in his mouth. "Titan, what do you have there?" Rosa asked with the tone of caretakers everywhere who recognized trouble in the making. Titan approached and carefully deposited his prize at Rosa's feet. It was a flower, a delicate bioluminescent bloom that must have come from the sanctuary's botanical section. His 4 blue eyes looked up at Rosa with unmistakable pride. "Oh, you sweet boy," Rosa said, reaching down to accept the gift. "Did you pick this for me?" Titan made a sound that was part purr, part trill, and entirely unlike anything Professor Zethkar had described in his lecture. "Titans are romantic," Rosa explained to her stunned audience, "always bringing gifts. Last week it was an interesting rock. The week before that, he somehow managed to weave grass into what I swear was a crown." Professor Zethkar made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, possibly both. "Mrs. Vasquez," he managed to say, "could you perhaps explain to my cadets how any of this is possible? Everything we know about Void Stalker psychology indicates they should be impossible to approach without military-grade weapons." Rosa's expression grew thoughtful, taking on the patient look of someone who had explained this many times before. "Professor, may I ask how military forces typically approach Void Stalker encounters?" "With maximum firepower and defensive positioning," Zethkar replied automatically, the response drilled into him by decades of training. "And what do you think highly intelligent, emotionally complex pack animals think when they encounter that kind of aggressive posturing?" The question hung in the air like a revelation waiting to be born. They would interpret it as a threat," the professor said slowly, pieces beginning to fall into place. "Exactly. And what do traumatized pack animals do when they feel threatened?" "They defend themselves," whispered a Helixani cadet, her shell slowly emerging from its protective coil. "With their pack," added a Kethmori, his tentacles writhing with newfound understanding. "Now you're getting it." Rosa beamed at them like a teacher whose students had finally grasped a difficult concept. Void Stalkers aren't mindless killing machines. They're highly intelligent, deeply emotional pack animals with complex social structures and strong family bonds. Of course, they're going to react defensively to military intervention. Behind Rosa, Storm had discovered what appeared to be a puzzle toy, a complex arrangement of movable parts that required problem-solving skills to unlock treats hidden inside. He was working on it with the focused concentration of a chess master, occasionally making soft sounds that seemed to be directed at Echo, who was watching his technique with obvious interest. "The key to working with any so-called dangerous species," Rosa continued, "is understanding what they actually need rather than what we assume they want. Void Stalkers need territory, family structure, mental stimulation, and purpose. When those needs aren't met, when they're constantly under threat, of course they become aggressive." "But surely," Kethvar protested, making one final attempt, To salvage his worldview, they must display some natural aggression, some evidence of their predatory nature. Rosa exchanged a look with Elena that somehow managed to be both amused and affectionate. "Oh, they're absolutely still predators," she confirmed. "Very efficient ones. The local pest population never recovered after they arrived. And I certainly wouldn't recommend trying to break into our facility. Storm takes his protective duties very seriously." She gestured toward the eldest Void Stalker, who had paused in his puzzle solving to look directly at the camera. For just a moment, his 4 blue eyes held the kind of intelligent awareness that reminded everyone exactly what they were looking at. Not a pet or a curiosity, but a being capable of incredible power who had simply chosen to be gentle. "But mostly," Rosa continued, "they want the same things most intelligent species want: safety, family, purpose, and respect. Once you provide those things, you'd be amazed how reasonable they can be." Titan had wandered over to a large viewport that showed the lunar landscape beyond the sanctuary. His body language was relaxed, contemplative, as he gazed out at the stars visible beyond Earth's moon. "Titan loves to stargaze," Rosa noted fondly. "Storm thinks he's remembering the void regions where his species evolved. Sometimes all 3 of them will spend hours just looking at the stars together." The image of 3 apex predators engaged in peaceful contemplation of the cosmos was somehow more paradigm-shifting than anything that had come before. "The galaxy is full of species labeled as dangerous or impossible to coexist with," Rosa said, her voice taking on the tone of someone making an important point. "But in my experience, the most dangerous creatures are usually just misunderstood ones who haven't been given the chance to be anything else." As the transmission ended, and the amphitheater slowly returned to normal lighting, the cadets began to stir from their collective state of worldview reconstruction. The implications of what they had witnessed would take weeks to fully process. "For your next assignment," Professor Zethkar announced, his voice still carrying notes of amazement, "I want each of you to research a species currently classified as extremely dangerous and propose alternative approaches to first contact. And someone please ask Mrs. Vasquez if she has room in her intern program. I have a feeling our entire curriculum needs revision." Elena smiled as she gathered her materials, already composing a message to her grandmother about having some very interesting visitors in the near future.